Hello everyone, welcome back to the Plunder Den. In this week's episode, we're going to be building some ocean scatter terrain. So this is definitely an extension of the Trey Parker table, but it's a smaller portion of it, some scatter bits for the bay. Of course, I'm building an entire seaport for that table, and there's an ocean component of it. And I definitely had some commitments for the Summer of Plunder. I always volunteer every year to build terrain as prizes for the winners in Summer of Plunder. And so I figured I could incorporate both. I can build some scatter that I can give away as a prize, but also further building my game table. And this is always something that I was going to add to the Trey Parker table. It just so adds some interesting aspects to the ocean side. These are removable. They don't have to use any of them if they don't want, or if they want to make the bay really dangerous with all these different rock formations that they have to get around to get into the bay. Could be a little interesting, especially if you're taking fire from the coastal line and you're trying to get through these rocky formations. Or if they just want to take the rocky formations off, roll out a water map on the travel or out on the road or something, and just throw some of these rocky bits on there just to make their ocean map a little more interesting. So that's really kind of the idea behind these pieces. Now, these are very versatile pieces of terrain. And the best thing to do is just look at it. So here's some of the bigger pieces. There's like 20 different pieces here. I built quite a few because I built 2 sets. So these are some of the bigger ones. And you can see they're kind of I went with a jaggedy kind of rock look to it. Inspired by just pictures online I just looked at for coastal rocks and shorelines. And these are all, of course, saw these off the coast of like Scotland and Newfoundland, but there's stuff in the Caribbean that would have rocky formations leading into the into the beachheads and stuff like that. So I thought this would be perfect for adding a little more danger to the bay, let's just say. But I made all sorts of different sizes. So I've done smaller sizes too, like this. And you can see just a little bit, so you can really kind of scatter them all over the place and make it a little interesting. Or maybe you want to add it to a shoal that you already have out there. Anyways, there are all sorts of things that make it a little more interesting. Now, I'm talking about versatility. This easily, like some of these mid-sized ones, this easily could be used as an island in oak and iron. Maybe you want to add it to oak and iron and something else. Or maybe you want to make a fantasy version of this, and instead of having the water part, you have like molten lava and stuff like that, and you can have it on kind of like a Mustafar kind of look to it in a Star Wars game. So you could use the same concept, but just build it in a different way, changing up the base a little bit to fit the game you play. So this is a very versatile piece that we're building today. And before we get down to the table, if you guys like what we're doing here in the Plunder Den, make sure you smash that like button and consider subscribing to the Plunder Den and get first-hand information when I start these kind of projects. Everyone, let's get down to the table. Let's start doing some painting, and let's start doing some crafting. Okay, so let's look at some of the materials we're going to need for this. So we need some ready board, dollar store foam board. Now, if you wanted to use MDF board, you could. I just use the lightweight dollar store foam board. It makes the pieces a little lighter. Insulation foam, this is 1 inch thickness. Because I want to make these big rocky formations, I'm going to use the 1 inch thick. Not the ½ inch, it's too thin. These dry decks, DAP, drywalls, compound. It's just it's stuff that's pink and then turns white when it dries. Really good stuff. I use it for basing and all sorts of projects. And this is the Art Minds Blue Waterscape. Now, unfortunately, this has been discontinued. So if you go to your local Michael store, you might be able to still get it on clearance. I have a few bottles left. I'm really sad that it's because I really use this a lot for a lot of projects. So, but I'm going to move on to using another product by Woodland Scenics. It's available on Amazon. It's essentially the same thing. And it looks like it's virtually the same color. So I'm going to give that a whirl and use that instead as a good substitute. It has good reviews, so I'll use that instead. So moving on to what I did first, I drew these shapes onto the dollar store foam board, just random shapes that I want to build this rocky terrain on. You got some small ones, some medium-sized ones. You got some odd shape, looks like a C. All sorts of different shapes. And once I cut them all out, I cover them in black multi-surface craft paint. Now, this is an important step. I've been getting a lot of comments in there saying that this doesn't work, and what I found is a lot of people add water to the paint. Don't add any water to the paint. You want the paint to be nice and thick, so it just sits on top of the paper and not absorb into the paper. And when it dries, it hardens, and then you got like a hard building surface. I think I've skipped that step and not explaining that, so I figured I'd better point that out. It was a really good comment that was brought into in the comment section about that, and I figured I better explain that a little bit better. So moving on to getting my rocky shapes, I just cut it into basic shapes for some squares. We got some sharp triangles, and that these are kind of the basic shapes that I'm gonna build from. Then using my blade here, I kind of cut it into shapes like this. I just use it over a garbage bag and just kind of carved it in there. Be super careful with your knife, obviously. Don't cut yourself, but it's really easy with a sharp X-Acto blade to carve up this. And you can see I wanted to make sure I carve it on every side. So if you carve it only on the one ends, it'll look like a piece of foam board. So you really want to cut that on all different sides, so it gets a more three-dimensional look. Then I used my tinfoil ball and gave it a texture, just like I always do, and it gets that rocky texture. And then I used, to make some streak lines and some sediment lines, I just used my little palette knife and just carved it in there and kind of crisscrossed them in certain areas. Just gave it a nice authentic stone look for, a shoreline stones. So, and of course I got to do all of these guys. So I got small ones, little ones. I make all sorts of different shapes. So this took some time to do some carving. A couple hours it took me. I just put some music on and my headphones and just rock it out there and get these all done. And you can see that's what's left over. So first thing to do is get my tacky glue out and glue these pieces on here. The great thing about this project as well is it takes very few materials to make, and it's an easy way to make some scatter for your tables. It can be, like I said, this could be land stuff. It doesn't have to be water surfaces. It can just be rocky land, terrain, whatever you want it to be. So I just randomly, I pick a couple large ones, a couple small ones. Really, it's up to you. Just glue it on in a formation. The only thing to consider is be careful about gluing things too close together because it's going to be hard to paint it afterwards. So consider the painting step next. So I know I got a little crazy on a few of them, and I was thinking of that afterwards, like, geez, maybe I should have separated that a little bit. Made it a little more challenging for me. Plus, also to add this drywall compound. So I just use my huge miniatures palette knife, as I always do, and how I do it is I just scoop up big chunks of that drywall compound, slap it on all like 4 or 5 sides of the piece of terrain, and then spread it out. Now, if you find where it's dry and it's not spreading out nice, just add a little water to your palette knife, and then you can smooth it out a little bit better. But you kind of want it to be kind of all wavy. So just kind of you take your palette knife, go back and forth, and then you leave these lovely little ridges everywhere. So it looks like water, right? It looks like waves hitting the rocks, and you want to have that formation on there. And that's why I use the drywall compound. It adds a lot of texture to the bottom, and it really sells the water effect. So you can see I've pushed it right up onto the rocks, and that's perfect. It's going to be covered in, make it look like water splashing onto the rocks. So this is just showing you all the different areas. So once that's dry, you can tell when it's dry, it turns white. Hit it again with the black multi-surface craft paint again, and we're going to cover them all again and seal this in. That'll do a good seal. Now, when I originally painted it, I had to come back, I let it dry for an entire day, but it came back and there was a few pockets. That craft paint shrinks down, as I mentioned before, and you'll leave gaps in certain areas. So you go back and hit it with a little bit of black and get those final details, because you want this whole thing to be coated. You want it to be completely sealed in. So once that's done, we're moving on to our standard base colors. So we got some real brown here. And we are just going to cover it like this. So I've done one here already, just so you can kind of see the coating that I'm talking about. And I just use my big brush that I always use for my ships and everything else, and just kind of go to town. You don't have to be extra careful right now. I always paint the bottom too. Just add every time you add another layer of craft paint, you've added more protection to it. Now, you could go down the Mod Podge route and add Mod Podge to it. It's totally fine. It'll add also a lot of more strengths to it. But I just use multi-layers of craft paint over top of each other. Once you start pouring that resin on the bottom stuff, it's going to be solid rock. It's going to be super hard. It's going to be really good. So the next color I've been using is Bark Brown. And then I went into the Pebble, so that's what I'm showing here. I was going off on a tangent there. But these are the same undertones that I always use. Real Brown, Bark Brown, and Pebble. And I've added all those colors to all the pieces, as you can see here. These ones are all completed. And then we're going to move on to doing the base coats of the stone. So I use Camel. And again, these are all full car paints that I use, and if you've watched my videos, you know I virtually use them on every project I do. I always add a layer of everything on here, and again, I do this so everything in my little world looks like it belongs together. If you add all those basic undertones and you build your colors on top of it, it all looks like it's part of the same world. It's all part of the same game table, and it doesn't matter what I'm building or ship that I'm painting. Everything looks like it belongs in that world. So that's why I use the base colors. And I find they're good earth tone colors. You could try other different variations of this, but I do really like those ones the best. So just kind of showing you a little bit of the technique I use. I use a smaller brush when I'm doing the stone, kind of abandon the big brush and be a little more careful. But I don't want to completely cover it in Camel. It won't look good then. You got to keep some of those undertones of all the other colors I have underneath. So then I add a yellow ochre and brown, real brown mixture, a 50-50 mix. And I kind of get this, like that color, looks like a mustard color. And I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow to all the stones as well. I find that they're a little more yellow when you're talking in the Caribbean, more into the hotter climates. So I wanted to add that element to it. So I added a little yellow to the rocks. So this is Malignant Green. This is a speed paint by Army Painter. Great for putting like algae or just green plant life on anything, rocks, ships, whatever. Hardened Leather and Gravelord Gray and Agraxer Shader. These are also all sorts of good colors you can add to your stones. Add just multiple grays and grungy colors, and it really just adds a lot to it. Before you hit it with the Mummy Robe. So the Mummy Robe is the final highlight I put on everything, and it really gives it that stony look, and I kind of highlight the edges and give it a more sharp look to it. So this is after I've done all that. So now we're going to move into adding the water colors. So I got to paint the undertones of the water how I want it to look before I put the resin on top. So kind of make it darker on the edges and make it a little bit lighter as we get closer to the rocks. So these are the different colors I use. Hylard, a blue, which is a great speed paint. Deep blue, ultramarine blue. These are all Army Painter colors, by the way. Void Shield, that's one of my favorite colors, actually. Void Shield blue. And a gloss varnish, which I don't use in this step, but I just wanted to point it out. I eventually will add it to the rocks to give it a wet look, so it looks like the rocks are wet. Because right now the paint's kind of flat, right? So it's got a flat look and doesn't look like it's sitting in the ocean. And right now I'm just, with my lovely finger, I'm pointing out the fact that I'm going to make it lighter, closer to the stones, and darker blue as I get further away to the edges. All right, so this is after I've added the ultramarine blue and the Void Shield. So the Void Shield I just kind of dry brushed on to highlight the edges that were created by the drywall compound. And the ultramarine is just my base color that I wanted to put down on there. Now the deep blue and the Hylord blue here, I'm going to add it afterwards, as I'm going to show you in the step here. I'm just going to hit the edges. So I've kind of darkened it already, and this is one that I'm working on right now to darken those edges up. And just give that a nice, it'll look good when we add the resin over top of it. To have those 2 tones, 3 tones of blue underneath. Adds depth to the water. It makes it look a lot more realistic of these pieces. So I'm just going to show you, I'm going to do all the edges of everything here. All right, so this is after I've completed all that. And it's looking pretty good right now. I mean, really, you could just leave it like that if you wanted to. But it's got kind of a matte finish right now, so it doesn't really sell that really authentic water look. So we're going to add this Art Minds waterscape, a blue waterscape. And again, if you want to get some of this, I would suggest going to your local Michael store. It currently has just been added to clearance. You can pick up some bottles of it. And you only need a little bit of this. You can see I just put drops on and I just spread it out. That's all you need. It's just a spread that you put over top. That's why I love doing resin this way so much better than making reservoirs and dumping. Like I just can't do that. I prefer this method way better. And it's, if you're doing flat surfaces, this is a lot more realistic way of doing things. But if you're doing a huge diorama, and I'm not knocking anybody that does it, it looks, I agree, it looks fantastic, and you got stuff deep down you can see in the resin, and it looks really cool. But this is good for what we're trying to do here. So once this all dries, and I used a 24 hours wait till that resin is completely dry. And by the way, you're going to find it's going to be hard as a rock. On top of that drywall compound, it's super sturdy. So now I'm going to add titanium white to kind of add to the caps on the water, and then use that gloss to finish everything. So this is after that's completed. I did the white first because it is kind of a bit matte, but once you add that gloss over the white that I've added and then onto the rocks, it looks great. All right, so that's completed. Let's move on to the game table, kind of showing you how I'm planning on using these. And really, they're just rocky formations, so maybe you can't land on the lighthouse. You got to get close to it because these rocky formations, you have to go around it. So it kind of funnels. You can funnel people's ships into certain areas and make it a little more challenging because you could run aground or crash into the stones or hit a shoal or whatever it may be. It adds a little more element of danger while you're doing your sea battles here. And I thought it would be a really cool addition to the table. But also a good project for people to do. It's fairly simple to do this project. And again, you don't have to do the water formation. Maybe you want to do lava. Maybe they're land and you put flocking on it, and it just becomes rocky formations on land. So you could use these for all sorts of different things. But in my case, we're building water. All right, so that's it for this project. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.